China's unclear weapons in 2024. Within the past 5 years, China has significantly expanded its ongoing nuclear modernization program by fielding more types and greater numbers of nuclear weapons than ever before. Since our previous edition on China in March 2023, China has continued to develop its 3 new missile silo fields for solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, expanded the construction of new silos for its liquid-fuel DF-5 ICBMs, has been developing new variants of ICBMs and advanced strategic delivery systems, and has likely produced excess warheads for eventual upload onto these systems once they are deployed. China has also further expanded its dual-capable DF-26 intermediate-range ballistic missile force, which appears to have completely replaced the medium-range DF-21 in the nuclear role. China has been refitting its Type 094 ballistic missile submarines at sea with the longer-range JL-3 submarine-launched ballistic missile. In addition, China has recently reassigned an operational nuclear mission to its bombers and is developing an air-launched ballistic missile that might have nuclear capability. In all, China's nuclear expansion is among the 9 nuclear-armed states' largest and most rapid modernization campaigns. We estimate that China has produced a stockpile of approximately 440 nuclear warheads for delivery by land-based ballistic missiles, sea-based ballistic missiles, and bombers. Roughly 60 more warheads are thought to have been produced, with more in production to arm additional road-mobile and silo-based missiles and bombers. Eventually, the Pentagon's 2023 report to Congress assessed that China's nuclear stockpile now includes over 500 warheads, by our estimate. The Pentagon also estimates that China's arsenal will increase to about 1,000 warheads by 2030, many of which will probably be deployed at higher readiness levels, and most fielded on systems capable of ranging by the. If expansion continues at the current rate, the Pentagon's previous projections say that China might field a stockpile of about 1,500 nuclear warheads by 2035. These projections depend on many uncertain factors, including how many missile silos China will ultimately build, how many silos China will load with missiles, how many warheads each missile will carry, how many DF-26 intermediate-range ballistic missiles will be deployed, and how many of them will have a nuclear mission, how many missile submarines China will field, and how many warheads each missile will carry, how many bombers China will operate, how many weapons each will carry, and assumptions about the future production of fissile materials by China. Several U.S. government estimates about China's nuclear weapons stockpile growth have previously proven inaccurate. The latest Pentagon projection appears to simply apply the same growth rate of new warheads added to the stockpile between 2019 and 2021 to the subsequent years until 2035. We assess that this projected growth trajectory is feasible but depends significantly upon answers to the above questions. Projections for the growth of China's nuclear weapons stockpile depend significantly on assumptions about how China's 3 new solid-fuel missile silo fields will be armed. Research methodology and confidence. The analyses and estimates made in the Nuclear Notebook are derived from a combination of open sources. 1. State-originating data. For example, government statements, declassified documents, budgetary information, military parades, and treaty disclosure data. 2. Non-state originating data. For example, media reports, think tank analyses, and industry publications. And 3. Commercial satellite imagery. Because each of these sources provides different and limited information that is subject to varying degrees of uncertainty, we cross-check each data point by using multiple sources and supplementing them with private conversations with officials whenever possible. Analyzing and estimating China's nuclear forces is a challenging endeavor, particularly given the relative lack of state-originating data and the tight control of messaging surrounding the country's nuclear arsenal and doctrine. Like most other nuclear-armed states, China has never publicly disclosed the size of its nuclear arsenal or much of the infrastructure that supports it. This degree of relative opacity makes China's nuclear arsenal difficult to quantify, particularly given that it is likely the fastest-growing arsenal in the world. China may become more transparent about its nuclear forces over the coming decade if it deepens its participation in arms control consultations, the first of which took place in November 2023. Although building a culture of nuclear transparency from scratch will take time, despite these blind spots, it is possible to develop a much more comprehensive picture of the Chinese nuclear arsenal today than just a few decades ago by examining videos of China's People's Liberation Army, PLA, military parades, translations of strategic documents, and commercial satellite imagery. The relative degree of structure and standardization within the various PLA services also allows researchers to better understand the structure and mission of missile brigades and individual units. For example, China's missile designations generally indicate the number of stages that the missile contains. For example, the DF-26 is a two-stage missile, while the DF-31 is a three-stage missile. And each PLA unit's 5-digit military unit cover designation offers clues as to where the unit is located, how large it is, and its base and brigade assignment. In addition, other countries, particularly the United States, regularly produce public assessments or statements about China's nuclear forces. Such statements, however, must be verified as they can be institutionally biased and reflect a mindset of worst-case thinking rather than the most likely scenario. Analysis produced by think tanks and non-governmental experts can also be highly useful in informing estimates. The transparency surrounding China's missile forces in particular has been greatly enhanced in recent years by the unique work of Decker Eveleth, Ben Reuter, and the U.S. Air Force's China Aerospace Studies Institute. It is important to view external analysis with a critical eye, as there is a high risk of citation and confirmation bias in which governmental or non-governmental reports build on each other's estimates, sometimes without the reader knowing that this is occurring. This practice can inadvertently create a cyclical echo chamber effect, which may not necessarily match the reality on the ground. In the absence of reliable or official data, commercial satellite imagery has become a particularly critical resource for analyzing China's nuclear forces. Satellite imagery makes it possible to identify air, missile, and navy bases, as well as potential underground storage facilities. For instance, satellite imagery was used by non-governmental experts, including some of the authors of this report, to document China's new missile silo fields in 2021 and has been instrumental in continuously monitoring construction at those sites and at other bases across the country. The PLA standardization has also enabled researchers to better understand developments at China's military bases, as layouts and construction dynamics now increasingly follow the same patterns, designs, and dimensions. Considering all these factors, we maintain a relatively higher degree of confidence in our Chinese nuclear force estimates than in those of other nuclear-armed countries where official and unofficial information is scarce: Pakistan, India, Israel, and North Korea. However, our estimates about Chinese nuclear forces come with relatively more uncertainty than those of countries with greater nuclear transparency: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Russia. Fissile materials production. How much and how fast China's stockpile can grow will depend upon its inventories of plutonium, highly enriched uranium, HEU, and tritium. The International Panel on Fissile Materials assessed that at the end of 2022, China had a stockpile of approximately 14 metric tons of HEU and approximately 2.9 tons of separated plutonium in or available for nuclear weapons. The existing inventories were sufficient to support a doubling of the stockpile over the past 5 years. However, producing more than 1,000 additional warheads by 2035, as estimated by the Pentagon, would require additional fissile material production. The Pentagon assesses that China is expanding and diversifying its capability to produce tritium. U.S. Department of Defense. In 2023, China also reportedly began operating 2 large new centrifuge enrichment plants, and also took a significant step forward with its domestic plutonium production capabilities. Chinese production of weapon-grade plutonium reportedly ceased in the mid-1980s. However, Beijing is combining its civilian technology and industrial sector with its defense industrial base to leverage dual-use infrastructure. It is believed that China likely intends to acquire significant stocks of plutonium by using its civilian reactors, including 2 commercial-sized CFR-600 sodium-cooled fast breeder reactors that are currently under construction at Xiapu in Fujian province. Rosatom, Russia's state-controlled nuclear energy company, completed the final delivery of fuel to supply the first fuel loading in December 2022. And steam possibly seen emanating from a cooling tower on satellite imagery in October 2023 suggests the first CFR-600 reactor may have begun operation. In December 2023, the International Panel on Fissile Materials reported that the first reactor reportedly began operating at low-power mode in mid-2023, although as of October 2023, it had not yet been connected to the grid and had not yet begun generating electricity. The second reactor is scheduled to come online by 2026. Satellite imagery showing construction progress of the CFR 600 fast breeder reactors at Xiapu in Fujian Province, China. To extract plutonium from its spent nuclear fuel, China has nearly completed its first civilian demonstration reprocessing plant at the China National Nuclear Corporation, CNNC, Gansu Nuclear Technology Industrial Park in Jinta, Gansu Province, which is expected to be operational in 2025. China has started the construction of a second plant at the same location, which should be up and running before the end of the decade. The 200-ton-per-year fuel reprocessing capacity at Jinta and the 50-ton-per-year capacity at Jiuquan, Plant 404, could support the plutonium needs of the two CFR 600 reactors, especially since the first of these reactors will begin operation with highly enriched uranium, HEU, rather than mixed oxide, MOX, fuel through a supply agreement with Russia. The ambiguity of Chinese nuclear warhead types and uncertainty on the exact amount of fissile material required for each warhead design makes it difficult to estimate how many weapons China could produce from its existing HEU and weapons-grade plutonium stockpiles. Once both fast breeder reactors come online, they could potentially produce large amounts of plutonium and, by some estimates, could enable China to acquire over 330 kilograms of weapon-grade plutonium annually for new warhead production, which would be consistent with the Pentagon's most recent projections. While China's production and reprocessing of fissile materials is consistent with its nuclear power efforts and its goal of reaching a closed nuclear fuel cycle, the Pentagon suggests that it is likely that Beijing intends to use this infrastructure to produce nuclear warhead materials for its military in the near term. The degree of transparency surrounding China's nuclear materials production and its suspected expansion of uranium and tritium production has recently decreased as China has not reported its separated plutonium stockpile to the International Atomic Energy Agency since 2017. Thank you.